your father, he obviously loved you very much, probably had many good qualities, but he's a cold-blooded murderer at the end of the day. Did he ever have ambitions to move up and quit getting his hands so dirty? Because, obviously he's a tremendous earner, which is what keeps your organization going at the end of the day. It's the money. But it sounds like he never got promoted. Like he never even became captain, right?
At the end of his life, he did. When he got out of prison, he became a captain. Before he died, out of respect. Like the last time I visited him, he was like acting captain. The reason why they always said capo, because that's how he had so much power and he had so many.
Yeah.
So and he was asked to do things over captains, with that situation in Florida. The last time I saw him was and I was in prison when he got out in prison. I saw him in 1998. I saw him. That was the last time I saw him. He had gotten out, and I was in prison. He came to visit me, and he said they finally made me an official captain. I guess now out of respect, and he laughed about it.
Was he kind of bitter?
He was bitter years ago. He was bitter, but. He had so much power. He was okay. He had so much, juice, and he was so respected,
It didn't stop him from earning.
No, it didn't stop him from anything.
Yeah.
He got respect from the bosses, loved him. Vic Musso, who was the boss of the Lucchese family, loved him. Everybody liked him. Joe Messina. He was so well liked. He was so tight with everybody. Even John Gotti, I'm good friends with Sammy the Bull. We get, he's my guy. I know a lot of people have a lot of bad things to say about him, but he's good with me. He's good with me. But when John was in MCC in Manhattan, when Sammy cooperated, I was in prison myself.
What were you down for?
That time I was down for the policy, the numbers. I got busted for the numbers. But I didn't know that at the time. So when I went to prison in 96, now I'm in federal prison, and I ran across guys that were in MCC with John when Sammy cooperated, because he was in MCC, and they told me that John made remarks in MCC that if Fat Andy was home, I wouldn't be in this mess, because maybe he might have made my father the underboss, because what happened was he needed somebody from that fraction to be underboss, like Frankie DeChico, who set up Paul, who got blown up in the bomb. He needed someone from that fraction to keep the peace, and Sammy was the perfect candidate for that. He was a gangster, he was a killer, he was smart, he was an earner, and he came from that fraction. That was them guys, Danny Marino and all them guys, that was their crew.
Right.
My father was well respected with everybody, so he would have fit in perfect with John.
So if your father, think about that twist of fate. So if your father hadn't been locked up in the 80s, he likely would have been underboss to Gotti, and unlike Sammy the Bull, would never have opened his mouth when all the heat came down.
It's a strong possibility. My father definitely missed the boat, and he knew it. He knew, Tony Lee was involved. Tony Lee was involved in everything. Tony Lee actually turned down being a captain. And John got mad, and John used to tell me, "This guy don't want to be Tony Lee didn't want to be." We didn't know at the time he had cancer. So what happened was, that's how peak. So it's a whole crazy thing. So my father's in jail. John becomes the boss. My father is not upset, but he knows he missed the boat. Because if he was out, he would have been in on the whole thing, and he definitely would have been elevated to a big position. He would have definitely been in on it. Tony Lee is in the mix, but he's not feeling well. John wants to make Tony Lee a captain. Tony Lee tells him, no, thank you. John gets mad. This guy don't want to be, not to kill him, because Tony Lee knows him since he's a kid.
Yeah.
He tells me, John, imagine this guy don't want to be a captain. What's wrong with him? And my father now has an argument with Tony Lee in the visiting room. What are you, crazy? You got to take it. I don't want to be bothered. I'm not going to be on call 24 hours a day with this guy. So John tells Tony Lee, well, who am I? Because now what happened was my father's in jail. Angelo Kwak became the first captain. He gets shelved because of the tapes.
Right.
Then they make Jeannie Gotti the captain.
Who was John's older brother?
Younger brother.
Younger brother.
He gets indicted for heroin.
Okay.
Now he goes away. Now there's no captain. Now my father's in jail. Now there's no captain. Now he wants to make Tony Lee the captain. Tony Lee says no. He tells Tony Lee, well, who do I give it to? Tony Lee nominates Pete Gotti. That's how and now now John made Pete Gotti, his older brother, the captain.
I see.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was two of them.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it was just a crazy scenario.
Yeah. So now we're in the 80s. Your father's gone. Tony Lee's dying. You've got a coke problem.
Right.
But, you've taken a pinch or two. You're on the street again, though. Paul Castellano. Like, I want to kind of paint these years because the end is coming. For the glorious final era of the Mafia is coming to an end. Paul Castellano's now the boss. Obviously, Gotti is the main captain. He's got the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Queens. They're doing all kinds of stuff, selling tons of heroin, which is actually the reason that they killed Paul.
Right.
Is because they didn't want the tapes. They had a wire coming out that would implicate all those guys in dope dealing, which is they were not supposed to do. What was your relationship or how with that whole scene during the 80s, the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club? Were you out on the street earning?
Yeah. Okay. So my father went away in 84. When he went away in 84, I was going back and forth. So now he's got all these trials. He's got lawyers in Florida. Somebody had to stay in Florida to handle all this stuff. I stood it. So I'm married at the time. I have a son. I'm staying in Florida. Tony Lee and him, out of the money we're earning, they're giving me a stipend. I'm staying in Florida and I'm taking care of my father with his lawyers. I'm meeting with his lawyers. I'm going to all his court dates. I'm visiting him on a regular basis because now he's housed in Miami. So I'm sort of out of the picture in New York, but I'm going back and forth. John's the boss. I'm going back and forth. When I go up to New York, I'm seeing John. I'm going to the Bergen Hunt Fish Club. I'm going to Richie's Cafe, his brother's cafe. I'm hanging out with Tony Lee. Now I'm starting to get the drugs, the coke is starting to become an issue with me. 84, 85. My father got convicted, I think, in 86. I'm going back and forth. I'm not really earning any money on my own. I'm getting money from them because I have I'm not earning because I'm tied up with these trials, with visiting him. But I'm getting my end. I'm getting an end from them,
And this is the advantage of being a made guy is that when you get in trouble, what's supposed to happen is that you get a pension. Right. You're getting now.
Right.
Okay.
But my father was partners with Tony Lee. They split everything 50-50. So now I'm taking care of him down here. I'm going back and forth. 85, he gets convicted. I think in 86, he got convicted. Then he got cancer. He got throat cancer of the larynx. I fly up to New York. John Gotti and my father and Tony give me money for the John Gotti says to me, no friend of mine's going to die in jail if I could help it. They pay for a private surgeon to remove his voice box. They take out his voice box. He goes to Missouri, Springfield, Missouri, actually where John died. He was out there. My father, with Paulie Vario, was there.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And they teach him how to talk. Now drugs. I'm getting more.
After your father gets sent off to prison, do you go back to New York now? Now that
I didn't go after he left Florida. I went back to New York. So he was in
That's what I mean.
He was in Florida for 3 years fighting the cases.
Yeah.
When he went to Missouri, I went back to New York.
So let's talk about this time because now, this is where Gotti is starting to become infamous. He's beaten cases. This is where the documentary comes in.
Right.
Are you involved with the crew on Mulberry Street?
Yeah, okay.
Are you going down there?
Yeah, so now what happens is my father goes to Missouri. I go back to New York. I go back to work with the number business. My father, they still have the 90,000 a day. So I'm one of the guys running the number business, but I'm still fooling around with the coke.
Yeah.
I'm seeing John. I'm going to the Raven Night. I'm still around. I'm around everybody. I didn't get chased or anything like that. but I'm working with the number business, but I'm spending most of my money's going. I'm buying coke with it. You know, I'm just not right in the head. Then in '88, I decided to go into treatment.
Right.
Like I just couldn't do it anymore. I sent for Tony Lee. He came to my house, and I told him, listen, I got to go to treatment. You know, and he looked at me and goes, yeah, you better do something because I don't know how much more they're going to put up with you.
Right.
Because now I'm taking money off people, you know, I'm taking money off guys, you know, Mad Dog, taking money off Johnny Caniglia's, the cold-blooded murderers. I'm taking money off them, you know, I'm just doing stupid.
Right, because when you're that far gone off dope, you become a liability.
Yeah,
you start doing stupid.
you know, but I mean, I had gotten, you know, I got arrested, you know, I got arrested in the chop shop. I mean, I was getting arrested for stuff they knew I was never going to cooperate at that time. So anyway, Tony paid for I needed him to pay for the treatment because I had no insurance. He paid for treatment. I went to treatment. I got out of the treatment center. And actually, I got out of treatment on a Wednesday. And that Saturday, I went to see John Gotti with Tony Lee. You know, and I go see him. He always liked me. You know, he always liked me. He always treated me good. Even when he knew I was fucked up in the head, he loved my mother. He loved my ex-wife. He always looked out for me. For some reason, the guy always looked out for me. So I go see him on a Saturday, and he takes me outside. Now, here's the boss. He takes me outside, and he says, so what do you think? You got it beat? So I says, well, I'm not going to get high today. I told him, you know, just for today. You know? He goes, all right. He goes, is there anything I could do for you? You know, I don't want you stressed out. And he laughed. I didn't have a car. So I said, well, I don't have a car. He goes, you don't have a car? I go, no, I don't have a car. He goes, all right. We go back. He goes inside. He had an office. So there was the Burger Nut Fish Club. And then next door, he had an office where he had his barber chair in the back. He used to get his haircuts every day. So he goes in the office. He comes out, he goes, okay, let Tony take you to 84th Street in Atlantic Avenue. There's a car lot there. Go in the car lot and ask for Anthony, this guy Anthony. He's waiting for you. I said, all right. I get in the car with Tony. I go to the car lot. They say, you Anthony? He goes, yeah. I said, John sent me. He says, take whatever car you want. He tells me. I said, now I'm looking for a Cadillac, right? I goes, take whatever car I want. So I look at it. So I found a beautiful white 4-door Bonneville. Bonnevilles were big back then. So I find there's no Cadillac. So I find this beautiful white Bonneville and I take it. I get it. I go back to the Burger Nut and I show him the car and he goes, okay. And he said, here's $2,000. I go, really? He goes, listen. He goes, I want you to come here every Saturday because he used to eat lunch at the Burger Nut Fish Club every Saturday before he went to the Raven Night. I want you to come here every Saturday with $100 and don't disappoint me. He told me. I said, you got it. I go back the next Saturday with 100. I give him the 100. I go back the second Saturday, I give him 100. I go back the third Saturday and he tells me, how much you owe me? I said, I owe you $1,700. He goes, how you doing? I said, now I'm looking good. Now I'm clean. You know, I'm dry. I'm wearing nice clothes. You know, he knows now I'm back at it. I'm in the number business. I'm in the street now, you know, because I was good at it. You know, I mean, only them couple of years that I got messed up with that coke, but I knew that life. I had a good teacher. My father taught me well. I wish he would have taught me how to fix cars, but you know, he didn't, you know. So I knew the game. I knew the life. So and they knew that if I was clean, I was good at it. So I was an asset. You know what I mean? I would have been an asset.
Totally.
So he says, all right, listen, keep the $1,700 as a gift. And I kept it. And then I started making a lot of money on now I'm clean. Yeah. My head's on right. My father got his 40 years. He's, you know, where he is. Tony Lee's not feeling well. We don't know at the time. Then we find out he's got stomach cancer. You know.
What are you doing now? Now things start to take off.
Now things start to take off. Now I have I took over. So I extorted a vending company. Now I'm in the street. So there was this guy had a big vending company that was around us. He did something wrong. I chased him. I took over his company. Did
you have to beat dudes up? Like, is that how you would lean on a guy?
I didn't beat. What happened was, so this guy had a big vending company, gambling machines and pool tables and jukeboxes. But he was with us. He was with us, and we would take him. We would just take an envelope off him every month. He was just like giving us like a fee. Every month. What happened was, so he went behind our backs to these guys in the Genovese family, and he was doing business with them, and he was looking to sell the company to them. Someone that worked in his office was like my spy, called me one day and said, listen, Louis is on the route collecting money. Louis was a guy that worked for this crew with the Genovese family. I said, Louis is on the route, on Stevie's route, collecting money. What, are you kidding me? I get in a car with this kid, Chris, and I go into Brooklyn, and I find this guy on the route. And I jump out of the car, and my friend Chris put a knife to his throat, and I took the bag of money, and I told him, you better stay off this route. What, are you kidding me? Right? So he leaves. I take the keys, and then the Genovese family calls for a sit down. So we go sit down with them in Jersey with Mikey Gal, because now Tony Lee is sick. I go with Mikey Gal, and I go with this guy, Ronnie One Arm. He was another wise guy, Ronnie One Arm. He became a captain. He's doing life now. And we go sit down with the Genovese family, and they're putting up a stink that they were partners with him and all this. I couldn't say you're lying, because he wasn't there, Stevie, because now I had chased him. I took his keys off him, and I took over the company. The wind-up was, the decision was I had to go partners with the Genovese family.
I see.
But I ran the company, so I was partnered with them, but they had no say in the business. I ran the business. I just had to give them their end. And I took over the company.
And how was that money? Then the vending company.
Oh my God, it was crazy money.
So how are you, explain that? Like,
so we had spots all over the city in like after-hour clubs and bodegas and number holes. We had slot machines, joker poker machines, 8 lines. We had, Pac-Mans. We would, we had everything. I mean, we were making 20, 30,000 a week cash. Like, it was crazy.
And it's passive. It's just people putting their money in.
And you got 50%, like, so the owner got 50%, you got 50%. And I had a guy working the route. And all you do is plug it in and collect money.
It's crazy.
I had a service guy that fixed the machines. I had a warehouse. I had a truck, I had a van, 2 vans. And I started making a lot of money with that. Then I had a credit card business. I had a guy in the post office. We were getting credit cards. I had a major credit card thing going, like dupe credit cards, like even real credit. I had a guy in the post office that was giving us credit cards right from the post office, stacks like that. I had crews. So like this was I'll give you a for instance. This was my morning. This was my morning.
Yeah, what's a typical morning?
Okay, this was
look like
so
for a mob guy.
Let's say it's 19. Let's go 1990.
Okay,
90. Well, I was in jail in 91. I got out in 92. So 90, the end of 92, 93. This was my day. I'd get up, I go out. So there's a bakery in my neighborhood.
Where are you living?
I was living in Lindenwood, Long Island, and Ozone Park.
Got it.
I was married. I was living in Lindenwood. I had a triplex condo. So I wake up and there was a bakery in my neighborhood. I would go to and they made breakfasts, 2 old ladies. I would go there with my New York Post and my New York Daily News. I'd get my egg sandwich and my coffee, and I'd sit and then everybody would start coming. My partner Frankie would come, and my cousin, this other kid Frankie would come, and so my partner Frankie ran the credit card scheme. Frankie, the mechanic, he ran we had chop shops. We had a stolen car ring. We had chop shops. This other guy would come. He worked in the number business, and then we would send crews out. So, all right, today we'd have a van with credit cards. They're going out to Jersey to bang out credit cards. Then we'd have a crew that's going to chop the cars. We had 2 chop shops. They'd go to the chop shops and chop the stolen cars and bring the parts to the junkyard. Then I had the vending company who, all right, we need 5 slot machines for this spot. We need 3 slot machines for that spot. Then we would buy in jewelry with the credit cards. Then I would take all the jewelry. I have someone bring that to the guy that's buying all the jewelry. Every penny I made was illegal.
Yeah.
Every penny.
And envelopes are coming to you.
Every money's coming in all
every day.
Ways. I'm being followed every day by the cop. Like, it was just,
And how much were you kicking up? Because you're not made. So who are you? You're just an associate. Well, who are you kicking upstairs to in the family?
I'm proposed at the time.
Okay.
Right. My father is still alive. He's still the boss of the crew. So after Tony Lee never would take money off me. So I wasn't really kicking up to anybody because you got to understand, Tony Lee was my godfather.
Right.
And Fat Andy's my father.
Right.
So they're not going to take money off me, but I'm doing stuff for them. You know what I mean? Like we're making money together,
right?
But I'm not kicking up anything to them. I'm not giving them an envelope like other people that were with them.
Right.
I mean, guys around me were giving them money, like, but I wasn't personally giving them money.
Because it's supposed to go, the chain of money is supposed to go from the street to the associate who's taking it off the street to the soldier to the captain up to the boss.
Right, that's how it goes. But they weren't, they weren't taking no money off me. Tony used to break my balls because when he found out how much money I was making, because he never, when he found out I was making a lot of money, he used to break my balls. Like, I didn't know you were making that much money, you dirty son of a bitch. He would tease me, but I said, you want money off me? Like, because he loved me. He was like my second father. When I split up with my first wife, I lived with him.
Oh, okay. So he was
when I lived with him when he got arrested with John Gotti on the Carpenter case when they shot the Carpenter Union president in the ass. And he would tell me, I would come out and he would tell you know what today's date is? No, what? It's the first of the month. He's telling me, you know what has to get done on the first of the month? I said, what? Because you got to pay the rent. I said, you want rent from me? I said, if your son lived with he didn't have a son, said if you had a son and he lived with my father, you would think he would take rent off him? You want rent from me? And he used to just stare at me. So the money is rolling in. It's all illegal. It's crazy.
And Tony must have been, and your father must have been proud of you.
Yeah, then they were. Now I'm in. Like I got proposed. My father befriends Joey Molina. He's the boss of Philadelphia. And I'm bringing messages to the Gambino, like Nicky. They're sending me to Philadelphia to meet with this guy, bringing messages to him. I'm doing business with. I have friends in every family. It was just. I was doing great. I was. I had the respect back, and everything was going good.
Can I ask you this? How long does one normally, when they get proposed? How long do you normally have to stay in that proposal period before you actually get straightened out?
It all depends. I mean, it could be a day, it could be a year. You know what I mean? Like for me, so what happened was the first time I got proposed was every time I got proposed and I was supposed to get made, I went to prison. It's so crazy. So the first time I got proposed was in the 90s. Okay. I get proposed. My father's still alive. Tony had just died. And I'm waiting for the ceremony. I get arrested. I get arrested. I got proposed in 94, like that. I get arrested in December of 95. I proposed. My name went around. Everything's good. I have to go to jail. I get arrested. I get arrested for bookmaking. That's legal now.
Right.
I get arrested. I cop out. I get a 2 to 4.
This in the state?
In New York State, right, by the Queens Organized Crime Task Force. I get arrested on a joint task force. Brooklyn and Queens was a whole big bookmaking ring thing. I get arrested and I take a plea. I get 2 to 4. They have a going away party and Skinny Dom, who was a captain in the Gambino family, takes me outside and he says, listen, soon as you come out, you'll get straightened out. We'll have the ceremony. You'll get made. I said, all right. I turn myself in. I get 2 to 4. While I'm in there, I get indicted in Miami by the feds. Oof. With Nicky Carrazza on a whole big RICO case, murder conspiracy, and I get indicted in Florida. I get taken down to Florida by the marshals, and I get 10 more years.
Oh my God.
So I take a plea, I get 10 years.
And what year is that you took the plea?
I took the plea in 97.
Okay.
January of 97. No, January of 98. I'm sorry. I took the plea. I got indicted in the beginning of 97. They took me to Florida. I stood in Florida for a year. And then I went back to New York State because I had to finish my state time. So now I wind up doing 8 years and 3 months. While I was in prison, my father died.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
My father died. My father got out of prison in 97. In 97, he died in 99. When my father got out of prison, the guys that I was around then, Skinny Dominant, they fucked me over. They didn't do the right thing because it was a different world. Then they took everything. They stopped giving my mother money. It was just a whole big thing.
So were you already locked up when your father came home?
Yeah, I was in prison.
So you never saw your father's two free men since, you know, the mid 80s.
I never had dinner.
After 1984,
I haven't had dinner with my father from 1984. 1984 was the last time I had a dinner with my father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's painful.
I never saw him. He was either in prison or I was in prison or we were both in prison. So after he died, what happened was I had a falling out with the guys that were left. They did the wrong thing. They took money off me. They just didn't do the right thing.
We need to back up now because this is a key part of the story. You know, when we go back to the 80s, around the time that you go up to Vermont to get clean.
Oh, how'd you know I went to Vermont?
I got my sources,
That's
you know.
good.
I got my little snitches.
That. Good research.
So when
Founders Hall.
That's right. That's right. Way up there to dry out from your coke problem. It gets messy. Your sister gets married to a scumbag. I don't know if he's not made. He's not a wise guy, but he's a criminal.
Very dangerous. Armed robber.
Armed robber. Was he a junkie himself?
Well, he became a drug. When he had a drug problem. So my sister met this guy. My sister meets this guy. He was an armored truck robber. He's hanging out with this guy. He's partnered with this guy, Peter Sakara. They're dangerous kids. They're mobbed up. They're dangerous kids. She meets this guy, and she starts dating him. And actually, another captain in the Gambino film named Danny Marino comes to see us, me and Tony Lee, and he tells us, "Listen, your sister's got to stay away from this guy. He's no good. He's dangerous. He already was involved with my niece and he took money off her and a whole big thing. But of course, my mother and my sister, they didn't want to listen. And my sister continued going out with him. And he was a dangerous kid. He was a killer. I mean, they were dangerous kids. Him and his partner, they were dangerous. They did a bid for armored truck robbery.
Yeah. Did he ever abuse your sister that you know of?
I mean, he would get high and smoke crack or whatever, and he would get paranoid and he would rip her shirt off. I mean, he was dangerous. He was dangerous.
He certainly probably would have.
Yeah. But he should have just stood away from my sister. He knew she was Fat Andy's daughter.
Yeah.
His own friends told him to stay away from her.
Right.
But for some reason he didn't. And he should have.
Did you ever approach him and say, look, stay away from my sister? Or were you too strung out at the time?
No, I wasn't strung out, but I wasn't really paying attention so she met him right before I got clean. So when she first met him, I wasn't really paying attention. I was in my own self-centered world. I wasn't really paying attention. He was more or less hanging out with my brother. My brother Albert was more or less hanging out with him, and I wasn't hanging out with them. So I just wasn't paying attention. I had a couple of arguments with him. He robbed a friend of mine, robbed his house, this coke dealer friend of mine he robbed. So I had some arguments with him. I had some beefs with him, but I never told him, stay away from my sister. I just had some beefs with him. When I went to treatment, he hit my mother. He attacked my mother, and that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, when they hear about, citizens, taxpayers, myself, if you could imagine somebody choking and hitting our sweet mother, we want to kill him. It's the first thing we think was we wish we could take him out. When you're mobbed up, that can become a reality.
Right.
Why don't you walk us through it? Why don't you walk us through how he disappeared? So
what happened was, I'm in treatment and they had a baby shower for my sister, and I call up the next day to find out how everything went. And my wife at the time, Alice, tells me what happened. He goes, I came home and I heard screaming. I went down. He was choking your mother over this bar tab that he ran up, and she jumped on him. She scratched his face. A whole big thing transpired. I go, all right, now I'm in treatment. I didn't want to leave. I still had to finish what I had to finish. So I get out of treatment and I go see Tony Lee because my father's incarcerated. And I said, this guy put his hands on my mother. And Tony said, I know. I said, you know? What do you mean you know? I said, so what are you doing? What are we going to do here? And he goes, we're going to clip him. Just like that. Yeah. And I said, all right. And I said, yeah. So, and he goes, but your father has to okay it first. So I said, all right. So I had to go visit my father. Now this is the mob. Like, here, now I'm your son, and I'm coming to you now to ask you give me permission to go commit a murder.
Right.
Like, you know, like it's like, you know, father-son conversation. You know?
Right.
Like I'm asking you how to fix a flat, you know?
Right.
So I go visit my father.
And where is he now?
He's in prison.
What facility?
He's in Virginia.
Okay.
He's in Petersburg, Virginia. I go drive to Virginia. I go visit him, and I tell him what happened. And the first words out of his mouth, this is how mob guys are egomaniacs. The first words out of his mouth was, what does this guy think, I'm dead?
Right.
Like he made it all about him, or, you know,
like how could he disrespect me?
He choked your wife, almost killed my mother.
Right.
And what does he think, I'm dead?
Yeah.
You know,
right.
So he okays it.
This seems like an easy sell.
Yeah.
But also, you know, he's now getting his son into the murder game.
So I mean, now in hindsight, I wish he wouldn't have okayed it. You know, because it was a horrible thing we did. You know, my sister and my niece still hate me, which I don't blame them. So anyway, I go back to New York and I tell Tony Lee he okayed it. Now we're going to put it on record because we have to get permission. We're not just going to do something like that. So we sent for Jeannie Gotti. Okay. He was the captain at the time. We sent for Jeannie Gotti, and now they loved my mother. Jeannie and John Gotti loved my mother, and we tell him what happened, and he goes, all right. He goes back, comes back a couple of days later. He goes, John okayed it. John was the boy. John okayed it, and then we put it in motion.
So the hit, even though this guy that's married to your sister, he's not in any way made, straightened out. He's mobbed up, but he's a criminal. That hit still has to go up to John, the boss. It still has to be okayed, even though it's not beef between two members of the family. Just from you being associated with the Gambinos, if you want to murder somebody, it's got to be approved by the boss.
Any murder has to be approved. You just can't randomly kill people because that brings heat. Violence brings heat.
Right.
When the feds know you committed an act of violence, like that act of violence I committed, the feds hunted me down from the day that happened. Once they know you committed an act of violence and you get put on that list, you're finished.
Did your father, when you went to visit him, you know, obviously it's not through the phone. You're talking to him in the visiting room face to face. Did he tell you to make him disappear? Did he give you any advice on how to actually do it?
We didn't talk about anything like that. We just told him, you know, we just asked for permission. And then I went back and I said, he said yes. Then we got permission from John. We didn't have a plan up to that point. We didn't have a way or where or how or what. You know, it was just, let's get permission. And then once we got permission, then we put a plan in place.
Okay. And then, so you, who were the other two people involved? What were their names?
What do you mean? Who was the two
involved in the hit? The trigger
the day
man?
of the hit, it was me. The day of the hit, I picked them up.
Yeah.
I had the hardest job, really, because I had to pick them up and bring them there. So I picked them up, and I brought them to Cafe Liberty. Mikey Gal, Tony Lee's brother, he was a maid member. He was waiting outside, sitting in a chair. Inside the club was this guy, Freddie Hott, who was a maid guy, Skinny Dom, no, they weren't maids yet. Freddie and Skinny Dom were proposed, and Tony Lee was inside the club. I pulled up, and we got out of the car, me and him. Mikey Gal walked up, kissed us both hello, and we walked in, and when we walked in, Frankie walked in ahead of me. I wasn't nervous at all up to that point, and then Frankie walked in ahead of me. And when I walked in, I heard Mikey, because you could lock the door from the outside. And I heard the door lock behind me. When I heard the door lock behind me, I got a little nervous. And I walked in, and they had bagels and coffee on the bar. And we walked in, and I made myself a bagel, and I was eating the bagel. And then Tony Lee told Frankie and me, come in the back, I'll show you the garden. He had a garden in the back. And we walked out into the garden, and he picked tomatoes and cucumbers, and he put them in a bag, and he gave the bag to Frankie to take home with him. And then we walked back out of the garden, and Tony just grabbed Frankie's hand, because we made out he was coming there to hear about a score, because Tony Lee had a score from him. And Tony grabbed his hand and said, wait, I want to talk to you. And I just kept on walking. And when I walked, I gave the nod to Dominic, and Dominic took the pistol out, went in the back and shot him.
Yeah. And Skinny Dom was the trigger man.
Right.
Right. So shot him. Then you guys waited till it was dark.
Well, I left. They shot him. Tony Lee came out of the back room and said, okay, I had to go to the number office that day.
Right.
We had the number business. So he said, I go to the number office, make out nothing happened. Nobody, I got in my car and I left. I went to the number office. They took the body and put it in the trunk of Skinny Dom's car, and they parked it in Skinny Dom's alleyway overnight. And then the next day they took him on a boat and they, put him in the ocean, put him in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. Put weights on him.
Put weights on him and they put him in the ocean.
Opened his belly up.
Opened up his lungs and they put him in the ocean, and then, that was it.
Yeah.
And then,
and there was, so he goes missing. Obviously, your sister's distraught. She suspects you. But it looks like a clean crime. It looks like there's no body, there's no case.
Nobody. They suspected us, but they didn't. I mean, they were in denial. His father kept coming around, and his friend Peter kept coming around, and then they stopped coming around. I mean, it was just a bad situation. I mean, I actually went looking for him with his own father. I mean, it just was a crazy way to live. You know what I mean? Like, here I am. I'm in the car with this poor guy looking for his son when I know we just killed the kid.
It's almost better. It's almost more dignified or merciful to the family to just shoot him in the head and leave him on the street, because at least there's some closure.
We figured, nobody, no body, no crime.
Yeah.
But that's the mafia. So here we are. Here is father and son. We commit a murder together. Yeah. Now my sister meets another guy after this.
Okay.
Now she goes through the grieving process and everything, and she meets this guy named Chris. Now, Chris isn't mobbed up like Frankie. Chris is just a kid from the neighborhood, fooling around with drugs, stealing cars, not mobbed up, don't know a wise guy from a hole in the wall, like just a neighborhood kid.
Right.
Dumb neighborhood kid.
The Ruggiano women really know how to pick them.
Yeah, bad pickers. So now my sister hooks up with this kid. They get arrested in a stolen car with credit cards. This kid has credit cards. He's driving in a stolen car. They get arrested. My sister gets out. Now my father comes see me. I go see him. I'm in the visiting room. I tell him what happened. She got arrested. This kid, Chris, he had a stolen car. He looks at me and he says to me, you know what you got to do here, right? So I looked at him. I go, I know what I got to do here. I said, what, are you kidding me? He goes, no. He goes, you know what you got to do here, right? I go, yeah, you know what we'll do? I said, this is what we'll do. I said, we'll kill everybody she goes with until she meets an astronaut. So now he gets mad. He goes, oh, yeah? Forget it. I'll take care of it myself. I don't want you to do nothing for me. He wanted me to kill this kid, Chris. He says, forget it. He goes, I'll take care of it myself. No, you don't have to do nothing. I'll take care of it. I said, good, you take care of it because I'm not doing that. Yeah. I said, right? Now I leave the visit. I go back to them and I sent for this kid, Chris. I tell him, listen, you better get the out of here because you're going.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? I tell him, and the reason now this is so Frankie, I'm sorry I did what I did. Frankie was mobbed up. Frankie knew the deal. So my thing is this, you know the deal. You're mobbed up. You know what happens. You know the rules. You break the rules, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get killed.
Yeah.
Frankie knew the rules. So, not that I'm justifying what happened to him,
right?
But he knew the rules.
Yeah.
Chris did not know Chris was just a neighborhood
He's
kid.
A civilian, more or less.
Little kid fooling around with drugs, stole a car, what kids do.
Yeah.
That's what people do in their 20s, whatever. Yeah. So he ran away, the kid. He leaves, he runs away. Now I don't see the kid. Now I don't know if he's dead, if he's alive. I'm not even asking. I don't even want to know. Right. Like when I'm visiting my father, I don't want to know.
Right.
Like it's a dead issue.
Right.
About 2 years later, I get a letter from this kid in jail that I know, this kid, Chris. And he goes, hey, listen, there's this Chris Christoph, another kid, Chris. He goes, hey, listen, there's this kid, Chris, that just hit the yard. He said he used to date your sister. Do you know him? And I go, oh, thank God he's alive. Yeah. So I send back and I go, yeah, he's all right, and they took care of him. But, but the reason why I didn't kill him was because he wasn't mobbed up.
Yeah, he did deserve it.
So now if he was mobbed up and he knew the deal, maybe I would have had a different reaction.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that's, so here we are father and son were arguing over, like, because I don't want to murder somebody. Like, that's how crazy that life is.
Yeah.
But we think that's normal. We thought it was normal. Like, my father used to tell me, don't ever feel sorry for the general, don't ever feel sorry for the public, he used to tell me. He goes, don't, and I used to tell him why. He goes, because they deserve every they get for voting for these people. Like, his theory was the government was the mafia.
Right.
Like, he said, listen to me. He told me one day, we were watching a show one day about the founding fathers. So he tells me, founding fathers? He goes, let me tell you what happened. He goes, one day in Philadelphia, they were in this pub, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and all of them, and they're drinking beer. And one of them said to the other one, hey, why are we sending this English bastard all this money when we could keep it for ourselves? And they started a revolution, he said. And then they wrote the book on treachery, he told me.
Right.
Yeah, that was his theory. Like, he hated the government. They hate the government.
Yeah. He was an old school Italian guy that didn't really feel allegiance to America as much as he did to his own neighborhood. Like, that's an old school, and his people, Italian Americans.
He had no allegiance to the United States.
Right.
They hated the government.
Yeah.
They hated law enforcement.
Yeah.
They hated it.
Because they were discriminated against
but you gotta
for
understand
many years.
Too, you got to understand, people don't understand that at one time, everybody was corrupt.
Yeah.
If there wasn't corruption, the mafia would have never became what they became.
Right.
I mean, who believed prohibition wasn't a corrupt act? I mean, they knew who was going to make all the money. I mean, Kennedy was a bootlegger.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So there was always corruption.
Right.
And the mob guys knew about it. Like Roosevelt, the great Roosevelt president, went to the mob when he was the governor of New York, went to the mob to get the votes in New York to become president.
That's right.
They know there's corruption. They knew that and that's why they hated them, because they used the power against the people that helped them. Kennedy gets murdered.
That's right.
Why? He double-crossed everybody that helped him. The mob makes this guy president, and then he makes his brother attorney general, and who does he go after? Hoffa.
That's right. Turns around and comes after.
Right, so of course they hated the government. I mean, listen, that's why when the judge sentenced my father, he said, you've been disrespecting this country since you've been 18 years old.